Hello, I have a controversial topic for us today: science and astrology. There are a lot of different opinions about science and astrology, and I'm going to jump into this very controversial topic with some shocking facts that are going to be difficult for many, many astrologers, probably the majority of astrologers and the majority of scientists. So I'm going to jump into a hot topic, a controversial topic. I'm going to make some controversial statements, and these statements, almost all of them, are facts. So here we go. Let the fireworks begin. Here's the first strong thing I'm going to say as a prelude to what I'm going to share with you, that what you think about astrology is wrong. I'm going to explain why what is commonly believed about astrology by many astrologers as well as scientists is wrong, okay? So I'm just giving you a preview to some of the shocking ideas that I'll present. So warning, the following information may be disturbing to some viewers. We get this kind of warning sometimes before news items and so on. And I said it kind of humorously, but it is true. This can be disturbing, but here, let's go. Let's face the music, as we like to say. Number one, I've got 10 items. First of 10 items, this one directed to astrologers. Your methods for determining if astrology works are obsolete. They're just obsolete. They're not contemporary. So why do I say that? Because we are in an age where artificial intelligence, massive databases, tremendous computing power can reveal whether Aries is pioneering, Taurus is stubborn. So in astrology, lots of statements are being made. They can be tested. They can be evaluated. In fact, they have been tested. I'll get to that point later. We can do these things. These new research methods are flexible. They're powerful. But what astrologers often say is they say that, this careful analysis, this science is mechanistic. It's going to try to put labels on things. Immediately, many astrologers have this skepticism about, being careful and using these methods, when in fact they do not put things in boxes. They can be very liberating, and science has for over 100 years ago revealed the nature of reality that is so inspiring, so counterintuitive, so outside the box. And you can go back to Einstein's theory of relativity, over 100 years old. My point is that just basing things on your personal experience and what you seem to be seeing without using these additional methods is antiquated. It's not how life works in the 21st century or even the late 20th century. It's not how we figure things out. It's not how we do things. We don't just rely on our personal experience. There's way, way more going on. We are in a revolutionary information age. So that whole approach is obsolete. It needs to be supplemented and invigorated with the modern tools and modern ways that we understand things. So that's just number one. Number two, so I'm talking about the relationship of science to astrology. So my first point is that astrology is not participating in the scientific world. It's just not. It could, I would say it should, but it isn't. That's my first point. Second point is some of the negative results of not participating in the world of artificial intelligence, of machine learning, of huge databases and computing power, and flexible analytical tools for critically evaluating things. By not participating in that and just relying on your personal experience and historical ideas, there's huge problems. Number one, the selection bias and the selective perception that are involved are so widespread, they're so rampant in astrology, that it makes it impossible to make a reasonable case for your ideas. So point number two is this reliance on your personal experience is going nowhere. It's just spinning your wheels, going nowhere. Just some simple examples. When you talk about Gemini, does anybody talk about Steffi Graf, the former tennis player? When people talk about Scorpio, do we ever bring up Katy Perry? These are triple sign, triple Gemini, triple Scorpio, extreme conspicuous cases. In a field that's evidence-based, like what's happening in modern professions, these kinds of cases of clear, conspicuous, we call them features or predictor variables, the qualities that we're interested in, when they're so conspicuous, you would naturally want to focus on it and talk about it. Now, if Steffi Graf fit the Gemini, if she was very talkative and fit all the things, I can guarantee, without a doubt, you would hear about her all the time whenever people talk about Gemini. She happened to be very reticent, very quiet. She doesn't fit a lot of what we would expect, so we don't hear about her. This tendency to have selection bias and selective perception is so insidious, it's so unconscious, it's so ingrained that it is weakening all of the claims of astrology. So I'm just presenting what I would consider to be facts. These are the facts. We're not talking about these kind of cases. Why? Because they're not attractive. They're not attractive to our assumptions about how things work. This is not the way of the modern world. It's like an old, antiquated thing. Number three, when you present astrologers with a case like a Steffi Graf or Katy Perry or thousands of other cases, they'll say, well, you need to look at the whole chart. That's the most common response I get. You need to look at the whole chart. Well, in itself, that's fine. But the problem is that statement, you need to look at the whole chart, has become an excuse. It hasn't become a reason, it's become an excuse. An excuse for what? For an excuse for an astrological language that is so flexible that you can make sense of anything. So people will say, oh, the variables are multivalent. They can be expressed many kinds of ways. And they'll say, well, Steffi Graf doesn't have all that Gemini because some of the planets are in the 12th house. Well, if you say they're in the 12th house, then you have to use a certain house system, which a lot of astrologers don't use. And then somebody else will have a lot of planets in the 12th house, and it won't be invisible. So why is that? And then they just say, oh, it can happen different ways. You end up with such a language that's so flexible that sometimes you're going to say the rule of the ascendant overpowered it, or a square from malefic. So many ways, so many multivalences of such a flexible, finely nuanced, complex language that you can talk your way out of anything. And that's what's happening. So maybe it's true that astrology is so multivalent and complex and anything can happen. But in that case, astrology just is not part of the modern way of life, where you can just talk your way out of any situation. It's not what people do in the modern world, in any profession. So, point number 4 for astrologers, another way in which astrology does not participate in the scientific world. It could, but it chooses not to. A fourth way that astrologers choose to avoid science and critical thinking, you don't even have to call it science, just any kind of critical assessment, is to avoid anything that contradicts your model. So when somebody brings up something that doesn't fit your model, we use this word model, your theory, your paradigm, your whole conceptual framework for how things work, you're faced with something in an evidence-based practice that's managed properly. You address these problems. You're very, very focused on things that don't work. You try to resolve what's going on. Maybe you can't resolve it. Maybe it's confusing, but you keep at it. You keep trying. So there are many things in astrology that just are confusing. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It means it's something. It doesn't mean that all of astrology is wrong. But astrology avoids critical assessment. It's just what happens. So an example of this. There's a city in Finland, Rovaniemi, and they have an airport, Rovaniemi Airport. And at this airport, twice a day throughout the entire year, the ascendant disappears. It's gone. There is no ascendant. If you look at the astronomical definition of what the ascendant is, there is none. I won't go into that here, but there's no ascendant. The ascendant is supposed to be an extremely important point. The flights are normal, babies are born, activities are normal, nothing strange happens. There is no ascendant, there are no houses. You don't even have whole sign houses. There's no way out. There's just no houses with this because there's no ascendant. Literally does not exist. If you're curious about that, I've made videos about it, etc. But why would you not know about it if you're an astrologer? Because of what I have here in that light blue highlight. We avoid facts that contradict the model. So what I'm emphasizing with these first 4 points is that astrology, modern astrology, has chosen not to participate in critical assessment. It's just not interested. Just my experience, my teacher's experience, my colleagues' experience, what the tradition says is good enough. We don't need the interference of all of these modern ways of understanding and coming to grips with an idea. It's chosen to not participate. That I think are very clear observations. And if that's your philosophy and you think that's okay, then great. Don't expect astrology to be anything more than some kind of entertainment or curiosity that exists outside the realm of normal behavior. And if you're willing to accept that and that's the way it is, then we're all in understanding what you've chosen to do. Okay. But when astrologers say something like, oh, science is, or the system is not ready for us, oh, they're ready. They've been ready for a long time. You're just not playing the game. You're just not in the game. You're not doing the things that are part of what is done in a modern system. Now, point number 5 of my 10 points, and this one addresses for both astrologers and scientists, that before I state this one, I said up front that there are some things that are going to be new that you don't know about, which is that the major discoveries in astrology have already been made. They're done. The discoveries are there. It's not like, oh, someday, or, oh, the Glaucolians were the only ones who did some kind of solid quantitative research, and that's been debated from here till kingdom come and never resolved. No, people are just not paying attention to the research that's been done. They just don't care to popularize it or make a big deal of it. Doesn't mean it's not done. It just means that they're not talking about it. Astrologers are not talking about it because they're not interested in critically assessing things and using modern research methods and evidence-based practices. Scientists aren't interested because they don't really look at what's going on in astrology very carefully. So it just isn't in general awareness that the discoveries have already been made. So artificial intelligence and machine learning are not the only methods for breakthrough discoveries. We're always hearing about robotics and machine learning. They're wonderful. They're marvelous. They can be very great for astrology, but they're not the only things. Consider, for example, extreme phenotype sampling. If you haven't heard of it, Google it and read about it. Extreme phenotype sampling has been used to make very important major discoveries in genetics. I am using the same concepts, the same approach, the same theoretical approach, the same statistical concepts in astrology as is used in genetics. And I've even I emailed the authors of some of the pioneering articles on extreme phenotype sampling, and I told them what I'm doing in astrology, and I said, doesn't this sound similar? Aren't we doing the same kinds of things? You know what their response was? Yes. And they're excited that I'm using these kinds of flexible, new research methods in other fields. They want other people to use these wonderful techniques for finding out how things work. They work in genetics, they can work in other areas. I'm using them very successfully. So the idea that scientists are sort of like always anti-astrology and won't ever listen has not been my experience. These leading researchers publishing these very important articles in prestigious, peer-reviewed academic journals are saying, yeah, this is great that you're using the same type of idea. So, and how did I use them? I've used them in many ways. One was to test what the tropical zodiac signs mean. Is Aries pioneering? Is Taurus stubborn? So this kind of evidence-based practice, using flexible, cutting-edge, new research methods to get more confidence in how things work, it's going right over the heads of astrologers and scientists alike. Although there is a growing number of, especially scientists and a few astrologers, who are getting it, who are saying, oh my gosh, there's a revolution going on. There is an evidence-based form of astrology. Astrology does not need to be separated out and alienated from the modern world. It's available, the tools are there, the software is there, the databases are there, the research methods are there, the discoveries are there, and they're improving every day. It's a very exciting world we live in. Astrology has just chosen not to participate in it, but a very small number of us are participating in it, and we have already made exciting discoveries. There's a surprise for you. Surprise for both astrologers and scientists who simply choose not to look at those studies. Okay. But they are there. Now, and they've chosen not to look at them, but the information's available. It's publicly available. It's not like hidden. So a very comprehensive and thorough explanation of some of these most exciting discoveries is available, in addition to many dozens of hours of free YouTube videos on the scientific theory and the scientific research that confirms that some of the astrological variables are real. There's also the book, The Astrology of Bipolar Disorder, Scientific Breakthrough. So you don't have to spend money, you don't have to go anywhere, you can just go to YouTube and say, for example, the research that I've done, Research in Astrology by David Cochran, dozens and dozens of videos going into technical details, the results, simple explanations of the findings, and also we've made huge breakthroughs in why astrology works as well. So the information's there, and if you want to get really deep into it, you can buy the book, because it explains it like from A to Z, this whole amazing breakthrough that an evidence-based astrology actually exists. So our topic today is science and astrology. I told you this is going to be controversial. First few points I've made is that astrology, for the most part, has chosen not to participate in the scientific world. A small handful, a very, very tiny number of astrologers are participating and have had huge success. And the publishing of the information about that success is easily available. And point number 7, there are 2 parts to science, at least 2 parts. The main part is the evidence, the data, the observations, replicable observations. Do they exist? Do they exist in astrology? Yes. A secondary thing, not as important, but extremely helpful, is do you have a theory of why they exist? So I can drop an apple and I can say when I drop apples, they fall to the ground. Happens every time. Drop an apple, it falls to the ground. That's a scientific observation. I may not know why or how or have a theory, but first you have the observation. If you can develop a theory, an understanding, a conceptual framework, some way of putting that into some systematic understanding, then you can make more predictions of how things work. You can make more applications. It's hugely helpful, not necessary, but it's extremely helpful. And we have that as well. Contrary to what both scientists and astrologers believe, almost all of them, it exists. It's already done. So, for example, scientists keep talking about the strength of the gravitational effect of the planets. They like to laugh at astrologers. Oh, the gravitational effect of the Doctor is stronger than Jupiter, and so on. And astrology is so ridiculous. They didn't know about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but they still had an astrology. Really? Are you serious about these arguments? It's just really ridiculous. They're absurd arguments. So please, do a literature review first. Watch my video on YouTube, a new theoretical framework for astrology. Just go to YouTube, type it in. You can put my name in, you'll find it. It's an hour long. Oh my God, you're actually going to have to spend time to learn about the extensive research and the extensive development of theory. And that's only one video of many. There's dozens of hours just on all the theory behind astrology and how it's consistent with scientific theory. Now, maybe you will disagree with it. Maybe you'll find it weak. Maybe you'll find it impressive. But the first step is to address what's available. So don't talk about the gravitational effect of the Doctor. Give me a break. It's nuts. That's not the only possible mechanism for astrology. And we have mechanisms that are consistent with scientific theory and they've helped us make new discoveries. They do everything that a theory should do. So, surprise, I told you, this is a controversial topic, and I got controversial information that's generally not known by either astrologers or scientists. And astrologers and scientists may say, well, gee, that can't be true. I never heard that before. Well, the fact you didn't hear about it doesn't mean it's not true. I'm telling you where to get the information. Now, this one's for scientists on the relationship of science to astrology. Scientists often conflate zodiac signs and they conflate pop astrology with astrology. So, and this problem it's incredible that it gets even into academic journals. So there's, for example, an academic journal, I've made a YouTube video about this as well, on a research study that's in an academic journal that shows that people who believe in astrology are more narcissistic and less intelligent than most other people. And what they've defined astrology as is the usual thing done by scientists is pop astrology. Might be sun, moon, and rising signs. Just people, in this case of this research study, it was on people on Facebook who read about their horoscope. So they've defined astrology, the whole field of astrology, as people who follow pop astrology and sun signs, because from their point of view, that is astrology. It's ridiculous because it's just one tiny popular fragment of it. And what you've actually done, you scientists who do this research and read these articles, is you've studied the sociology of astrology, how a field that has no colleges, no college of astrology, no legal requirements. Imagine if there was no college of chemistry, no legal requirements to be chemists. There would be all kinds of alchemical solutions available that people would be using. So you have a unregulated field with doing huge amounts of nonsense. That's a sociological phenomenon. So stop conflating a sociological phenomenon with the nature of the field of astrology and defining astrology as a few little fairly ridiculous variables that are emphasized in popular astrology. Do a literature review and find out what astrology is. And also, scientists, not only did they make that mistake, but then you'll see scientists repeating over and over again ideas about the history of astrology that are just flat out wrong. This is really amazing that they don't have the history correct. So these are people who are not historians. They might be biologists or physicists or mathematicians, and they hear other scientists say something about the history of astrology, and then they believe it based on the authority of other scientists, and it's just wrong. So in the foundational book of Western astrology, the Tetrabiblos by Ptolemy, he makes it clear that he uses tropical signs and he discusses precession of the equinoxes. So this idea that the early astrologers identified the zodiac signs with the constellations and then they drifted away by precession of the equinoxes and nobody realized what was going on is simply not true. It's historically incorrect. The precession of the equinoxes was known by Hipparchus, who preceded Ptolemy. And when Ptolemy wrote his foundational book, he understood all this. He explains the theory for why he uses tropical signs. So that whole idea of the drifting of the signs is just not true. Ptolemy knew what he was doing. I have entire videos and articles about that, and other people do as well. And this is not just like my idea. Any historian of astrology can, Rochberg or any of the great historians of astrology and academia will tell you this. It's well known. So the emperor has no clothes. This is very embarrassing for academia, that they're just repeating, oh, the emperor has beautiful clothes on. Oh, astrology is wrong because the signs have drifted. And they just keep repeating this. And the whole thing's just not true. They're just repeating what they've heard. Very embarrassing, myself as an academic, embarrassing to see such poor, ridiculously poor scholarship. So that's another problem with the relationship of a science to astrology, is that a lot of what we're hearing from astrologers is alienated from the scientific world because they've chose to be alienated from it. And a lot of things we're hearing from scientists are just wrong Plus, you have the conflating again of zodiac signs with astrology. That's the only thing there is to astrology. In the research that I've done, we've been able to validate almost nothing with zodiac signs, but there are many, many other variables. We have validated them in the qualitative studies with extreme case sampling, but what they do is different from what astrologers say they do. But where we've gotten the most solid, powerful, quantitative results is with other kinds of variables. So there's multiple problems that scientists are projecting onto astrology. And the 10th and last thing with the relationship of a science to astrology is that the scientists are refusing to duel with a worthy opponent. I put this in a metaphorical way just to be a little humorous about it, but they won't take on a worthy opponent. So I have emailed many highly respected popular scientists. I won't go through their names, but I go to their website, I fill out the form, or I find their email address, or both, send them an email, and I say, let's have a debate. Here's the YouTube video you made, or the article you wrote, or the interview you did, and you said astrology is rubbish. Let's debate it. I think this would be good for the public. Let's have somebody who understands science, who's done scientific research, debate, is astrology rubbish or not? Let's do it. And they don't respond. I've also contacted major news outlets, and some of the major news outlets are showing some interest in this. So this is just another aspect of what's going on in the relationship of astrology to science. If we have a conversation between people who are doing real research in astrology and have validated things, like myself and other people, with scientists, we can get an intelligent dialogue going on. But scientists going around poking fun at pop astrology and the ridiculous things that it does is not helping, because it's conflating one popular little thing with an entire complex field. So anyway, so the fact that there's no response from the scientists does not surprise me. They probably get thousands of emails, and I'm not sure how many actually go to the person and just get thrown away or whatever. But continuing to criticize popular astrology and conflate zodiac signs and what some pop astrologers do with astrology after they've been contacted and told about the book, etc., and have given no attention to it, that's irresponsible and unethical. So this is some of what's causing confusion, is the lack of communication. And I'm trying to establish that, to cross that bridge, but not getting any response. I think that would be helpful. Now, the last thing I want to say is not so much a fact. I mean, the fact is I have contacted these people. The fact is astrologers, don't pay much attention to the latest research studies that have been done using extreme case sampling, which is similar to techniques used in genetics, etc. Those are pretty much, I think, factual. They're fairly clear, straightforward observations. Last thing I want to mention is a forecast. So not so much a fact, but just something about where I think we're headed, which is this. Evidence-based astrology, an astrology that works with the same kind of regulations and requirements as other professional evidence-based fields, is the beginning of a real paradigm shift. And we hear this word paradigm shift all the time, sometimes a little bit exaggerated, but this is a real paradigm shift, that there is such a thing as evidence-based astrology. Many astrologers don't believe it, or they think it might be off in the future. It's already done. It already exists. And that this has begun and that this will spread, it is unavoidable that this paradigm shift is underway. So even most professional astrology today is antiquated. As I said, it's not my first 4 points about astrology, not participating in the modern way of understanding the world, just chosen not to participate in it. And we're seeing the beginnings of this paradigm shift of something new. It's not the old astrology way. It's not coming from the scientific community. It's this new hybrid of an evidence-based astrology. We see it in the development of the Cosmobiology Institute, www.cosmobiology.org. It's just starting up. It's a nonprofit institute that will be established by the end of the year 2022. You'll see, as I'm making this video, what is this, in mid-August 2022, it's still under construction. You'll see some of the researchers and that are involved, and we'll be posting more information about it in the coming months as it gets established. It's an important part of the paradigm shift that we're now seeing what we're calling cosmobiology. Some people are calling it energy astrology. Some people are calling it vibrational astrology. Some people are calling it evidence-based astrology. Whatever you want to call it, it's really not astrology as we understand it. It has the same regulations and requirements as any other evidence-based practice. It has huge amounts of research that support it, already done, very sophisticated. They are available to people. It's all happening. And a growing number of scientists and astrologers are aware of this coming revolution. So far, the interest, as I make this video in August 2022, most of the interest is coming from scientists more than astrologers. So that's quite interesting. But there are a handful of astrologers also coming along. The data is published. It's available. There's no stopping this revolution. So that's just my conclusion about what's going on, because the information's there. It's published. There's an annual conference, Vibrational Astrology Conference, in early March of every year in Gainesville, Florida. There are activities. There are publications. There's an association. There's the Nonprofit Institute. It has the support of very highly esteemed data scientists, some names that people will recognize. This is really happening. This is really happening. Very rigorous, very modern, very exciting, tremendous. The excitement that we've seen in technology is now happening in understanding of human beings. A whole revolution, that there really is a relationship of what's going on in the sky with your behavior. Oh my God, how crazy is that? It's being validated. And the rules are not the rules that astrologers are using. They have some similarities. This is a whole new ball game, whole new world we're entering into. So that's my video on the relationship of science and astrology, what's actually happening in the field, what different people are doing, how different people are responding to it, and why almost all of it is wrong. Most of the things you hear, there's something going on, but in the coming years, you'll be hearing more and more about this paradigm shift and this new field of evidence-based astrology, which has a little bit in common with astrology, a lot in common with modern science. It's a new field, very exciting. Okay, so that's it, my friends. Oh my gosh, this took 33 minutes. I hope this would be a quick video, but it took a little while to explain it all. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.